The biker barked at me to take off my jacket loud enough for the whole cafe to hear, just as Patsy Cline crooned about heartbreak from a dusty wall radio. Name's Walter Green, 62 ex-military, currently renting a garage that smells like old oil and colder memories. The coffee was lukewarm, the glances were colder, and that stitched-over silver star on my shoulder. It started more trouble than it ever stopped. Ever been judged before you even spoke a word? The bus hissed as it pulled away, trailing a ribbon of white exhaust that curled in the cold morning air. It left behind a tall man with broad shoulders and a stiff posture standing alone between the cracked sidewalk. He wore an olive green jacket, the kind you didn't see much anymore, not in Foxridge. The wind tugged at the hem as he adjusted the strap of his worn duffel bag. Across the street, inside the warm amber of the Main Street Café, Missy Carter paused mid-step with a tray of cinnamon muffins. She blinked at the figure through the foggy window, her breath catching just a little. "Who's that?" Martha Jo's voice came from her usual booth by the pie display. Missy didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned closer to the window, her hand absently tightening the tie on her apron. Outside, the stranger took 2 slow steps, looked both ways down the street, then turned toward the feed store at the corner. Missy's grandfather used to say something that floated to her now unbidden. Some folks carry whole wars in their silence. She shook it off and carried the muffins out to the front counter. By noon, the cold had settled into Foxridge like it meant to stay. The flags on the porches flapped hard in the wind, and the bare trees creaked as if complaining. Thanksgiving was 2 days away, and the cafe smelled like brown sugar, roasted pecans, and strong coffee. Walter Green, as the name on his apartment lease would later show, walked into the cafe just past 12:15. He moved with a quiet deliberateness, as though each motion had already been calculated. His boots were dusty, his jeans pressed. That olive jacket still clung to him like a second skin. Missy greeted him with her usual smile. "What can I get you?" "Black coffee, ma'am," he said, voice low and polite. "That'll do." He paid in exact change, dropping $2 silver into the tip jar before walking to a corner booth. Nobody had used silver dollars around here in a long time. From the counter, Doug the mechanic raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He stirred his chili with one hand and held a buttered roll in the other. "That one's got Army written all over him," Doug muttered toward no one in particular. Martha Jo didn't look up from her crossword. Or maybe just doesn't like small talk. Missy filled the coffee mug ceramic light green tiny chip on the handle and brought it over. She set it down gently. "Let me know if you want anything else." Walter nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." The jacket, Missy noticed, had seen better days. The stitching across the shoulders looked like it once held patches now gone. There were outlines faint as breath on glass, a nameplate, maybe a flag, something rectangular that could have been rank. Later that afternoon, Hank Rizzo came in for his usual chili dog and hot cider. When he saw Walter at the counter, his steps slowed. Hank wasn't subtle, never had been. Tattoos peeked from under his hoodie sleeve, and his leather vest carried the Foxridge Brawlers patch, unofficial, local, and mostly retired. He squinted at Walter, then leaned toward Doug. "Something's off about that one," Hank muttered. "Too clean for a drifter. Too quiet for a vet." Doug shrugged. He tipped in silver. "That ain't a reason to trust him." Walter finished his coffee and gave Missy a polite nod on the way out. That evening, with the wind picking up and the sun fading fast behind the hills, Missy stepped outside to bring in the porch sign. She paused when she saw movement near the sidewalk. There was Walter, sweeping. He held a wide bristle broom and moved it slow and steady, guiding leaves into neat little piles outside the cafe door. No one had asked. It wasn't his job. And yet there he was, clearing a space for people to walk without crunching through dead November. Missy opened her mouth to say something, but then closed it again. He didn't seem to expect a thank you. He didn't even look up. Later, when she locked up and turned out the lights, she found the jacket folded perfectly on the cafe's coat rack by the door. The next morning, just after 6, Missy came in early to prep the pecan pies. She flicked on the lights, started the percolator, and went to hang her coat. That's when she noticed the olive jacket still sitting neatly on the rack. She frowned, reached into the front pocket without thinking, and paused. Inside was a folded newspaper clipping. She opened it carefully, fingers trembling. It was old, yellowed around the edges, from the Denver Post, dated 2005. The headline read, "Sergeant awarded Silver Star in Iraq vanishes after discharge." A photo underneath showed a much younger man, but the eyes were unmistakable. Same posture, same stillness. Her breath caught. She turned toward the front window. And there he was. Walter Green stood just outside, shoulders bare to the icy morning air, coffee in hand. He was watching the flag rise on the pole next to the porch, quiet as snowfall. No coat, no scarf, just him, the wind, and the stars and stripes climbing into the gray sky. The bell over the cafe door jingled sharply, letting in a gust of frosty air, and Hank Rizzo's voice with it. "You folks always let strangers wander in and stay like they own the place?" he asked, not bothering to lower his voice. A few heads turned. Conversation paused just long enough to catch the weight of his words. Then ceramic mugs clinked again, and the murmur returned, though just a shade quieter. Missy Carter, standing behind the pie case, wiped her hands on her apron and gave Hank a look that tried to say, "Not today." But Hank wasn't in the mood for looks. She glanced over at the coat rack. The olive green jacket was still there, folded the same way Walter had left it, untouched since yesterday. Outside, the town was already in motion. Frost rimmed the windshields of parked pickups, and kids in puffy jackets chased each other past the courthouse steps. A pair of turkey flyers flapped from the bulletin board in front of Town Hall Thanksgiving Potluck All Welcome, printed in looping script with hand-drawn leaves. Walter stood alone near the war memorial, just across from the cafe. He wasn't doing much, just standing there still as stone, hands in his pockets. But Hank noticed. "Look at him," he muttered toward Doug, who was seated at the corner booth closest to the window. "Stares at that wall like he owns it." Doug didn't answer. He spooned sugar into his coffee and stirred slowly, his eyes flicking back and forth between Hank and Walter. Walter stepped forward and adjusted something on the memorial. The small flag had come loose from its pole. With a few careful motions, he straightened it, smoothed it down, and stepped back. Across the sidewalk, Edwin Thomas appeared, long beige coat scarf, neatly looped clipboard under one arm. He paused when he saw Walter, lips pursed. Edwin was known around town for organizing the HOA's bylaws and correcting flag code infractions in front yards. He watched Walter for a long second, then folded one of the Thanksgiving flyers into his coat pocket without a word. Back inside the cafe, the air was warm and smelled of cinnamon rolls, pine-scented candles, and the faint tang of wood varnish. A quiet Patsy Cline song played from the old wall radio. Missy refilled the percolator and watched as Walter crossed the street. He came in without ceremony, removed his gloves, and walked toward the counter. "Black coffee, ma'am," he said. "Of course," Missy replied, already pouring. Walter reached for his wallet, but Missy waved it off. "Still got silver dollars in the jar from yesterday," she said with a soft smile. He gave a short nod. "Thank you." That's when Hank stood up. "You don't salute," he said loudly. You don't smile. You just sit there every day like you're watching us from behind glass. Walter turned slightly. He didn't speak. You didn't even flinch when the flags went half-staff last week. Hank continued, voice harder now. And now you're fiddling with the war memorial like you've earned the right. Missy moved to speak, but stopped herself. Walter didn't respond. He took the coffee in both hands and turned toward his usual booth. That's when Hank said it. Take that jacket off. The words hung in the room like smoke. You're not one of us. Hank added, his tone flat, not cruel, just certain. A hush fell over the café. Even Martha Jo, who'd been scribbling notes for choir rehearsal, lowered her pen. Walter stopped mid-step. The room held its breath. He turned slightly toward Hank, and the jacket shifted with him just enough for the overhead light to catch a faint shape on his shoulder. A threadbare patch nearly faded into the fabric, but not completely. The star was still there. Silver. Frayed at the points, but unmistakable. No one spoke. Even Hank's jaw clenched around words that never quite made it out. Walter gave Missy a quiet nod, then walked to the coat rack. He placed the cup gently on the counter, picked up the folded jacket, and slipped one arm into it, then the other. The star vanished beneath a crease. With no drama, no rush, he walked out the door. The bell jingled behind him. From behind the window, Missy saw him cross the street and pause again at the flagpole. He stood there, hands at his sides, watching the morning breeze tug gently at the stars and stripes. Inside, Hank had returned to his seat. He stared at the coffee cup in front of him like it might offer answers. Doug leaned over, speaking in a low voice. My dad served in the Gulf, told me once about a guy named Green. Real quiet type. Took shrapnel pulling folks out of a convoy. Hank didn't look up. Doug continued, more to himself now, said the guy vanished after discharge. Didn't want the fanfare. Hank shifted in his seat. Missy refilled the sugar jar at the counter and caught the brief glance Hank gave the door. Not angry, not suspicious. Just searching. Outside, Walter stood like a statue under the rising flag. The sun hadn't yet burned through the morning frost, and his breath misted faintly in the air. The garage behind the feed store smelled of oil sawdust, and something older like memory thickened into dust. A long bench ran the back wall, worn smooth by decades of use. Tools hung in uneven rows, each with its own story of small-town fixes. A bent wrench, a file with a taped handle, a hammer stained by time. Walter Green stood in the center of it all, jacket removed, sleeves rolled. His hands moved quietly, rearranging old tools with a kind of reverence, wiping down shelves, checking drawers. He paused only once before a folded American flag resting inside a wooden triangle case tucked neatly on the highest shelf. He didn't touch it, just looked. At the cafe, Missy flipped through an old leather-bound scrapbook her grandfather had kept in the back office. The pages crackled softly under her fingers, the smell of yellowed paper mingling with the scent of cinnamon and coffee. She hadn't meant to linger, but something tugged at her memory since the clipping she found in the jacket. Halfway through the scrapbook, she stopped. There it was. A laminated newspaper article, Staff Sergeant Green saves 12 in ambush Silver Star awarded. There was a photo, grainy but clear, the same posture, same eyes, younger, worn even then. She let out a quiet breath, tapping the page with her finger. No wonder Hank looked like he'd seen a ghost, she murmured. That same hour, Hank Rizzo stood on the steps of his mother's house, shifting awkwardly from one foot to the other. The house smelled like apple pie and old crochet yarn, same as it always had. His mother, glasses on a chain, was setting tiny ceramic turkeys across the mantel. "Mom," he said, "you remember that story Dad used to tell? About Iraq, the guy who pulled him out?" She glanced up. The one he called Grin, even though he never smiled. Hank nodded. "Staff Sergeant Walter Green," she said without pause. "Your father said he owed that man his life." Hank sat down hard in the old armchair. "You're sure I kept the letter, sweetheart? Your dad wrote about him right before deployment. Said if anything happened, this Green was the one to trust." By late afternoon, the wind had gone still and the last light of November spilled gold across the rooftops. In the garage, Walter was adjusting a crooked shelf when the side door creaked open. Hank stood there holding 2 coffee cups. "Brought the good stuff. From Missy's place." Walter glanced over, then returned to his work without a word. Hank stepped inside. "That shelf's gonna fall if you don't brace it." Walter's mouth twitched just slightly. "I was waiting for help." Hank chuckled once, then moved to the wall. They worked in silence for a while, drilling, aligning, steadying. Finally, Walter spoke. "Your father made me laugh," once he said, not looking up. "I hadn't laughed in months." Hank swallowed his hands, pausing over the screws. "He always said you saved him." Walter wiped dust from his hands, then walked over to an old metal box near the window. He opened it and took out a folded envelope, edges soft with age. "He wrote this before we shipped out," Walter said, handing it over. "Told me to give it to you. Said one day the boy would need to know more than medals." Hank took it slowly, staring down at his father's familiar handwriting. Meanwhile, back at the café, Edwin Thomas sat at a corner table with a stack of forms. He wore reading glasses and a prim expression, lips pursed as he checked boxes with a fine-tip pen. When Missy passed by with fresh napkins, he spoke without looking up. "I've filed a preliminary zoning concern," he said. "That garage was never cleared for residential use." Missy stopped. "He's just living quiet, Edwin. Doesn't bother anyone." Edwin folded the form carefully and slipped it into a manila envelope. "We have procedures for a reason. Occupancy health codes, temporary or not." He stood smoothing his coat. "The council will vote Monday. It's posted." At twilight, Missy walked past the bulletin board outside the cafe. Among the flyers for the Thanksgiving potluck and a lost dog named Button, a new notice had appeared, crisp white paper typed neatly. "Garage rental under review. Council vote Monday." She stared at it for a moment, the chill sneaking through her sweater. In the distance, she could see the light glowing faintly from the garage window. Just one square of warmth in the gathering dark. Inside, Walter stood near the flag case again. He didn't move. Just watched it. Foxridge had begun to dress for Thanksgiving. Paper turkeys lined the windows of the hardware store. Pumpkins, most already softening, sat on porch steps. Pine cones and twine decorated the lampposts downtown. Laughter echoed faintly from houses where pies were cooling and tables were being set. Walter didn't attend any of it. But from his window in the garage, he watched. Quietly, as though remembering a different kind of gathering. A different kind of November. Walter's jacket hung on a nail beside the garage door. It looked the same at first glance, olive green, time-worn, but this time the silver star patch had been stitched back in place. Tight, centered, undeniable. It caught the late afternoon light as the door creaked open, wind nudging it like a whisper. Inside, the old garage had changed. Long tables stretched from end to end, draped in mismatched cloths and checkered runners. Strings of soft yellow lights were looped from the rafters, casting a golden haze across the tool racks. Folding chairs had been pulled from every basement and closet in town. Someone had even lit a small radio in the corner AM 710, playing Moon River, so gently it barely brushed the air. Steam rose from foil-covered trays, and the sharp scent of roast turkey mingled with cinnamon nutmeg and fresh brewed coffee. Outside, Missy balanced a bowl of cranberry sauce in one hand and adjusted a place setting with the other. "We'll need more napkins near the cider," she called. Hank emerged from the back door carrying a wooden sign. Its edges were sanded, the paint still drying. "Green's Garage. Eston Shum, 1985. He set it gently against the wall, then wiped his hands on a shop rag. Walter stood beside him, watching the letters like they belonged to someone else. "My father carved the original," he said quietly, "before I left." Hank nodded. "My dad would have liked that you brought it back." They stood in silence for a moment before Walter added, "That name meant something. I thought if I erased it, maybe I could forget the rest too." "You don't have to forget," Hank said. "Just add to it." By sunset, the garage glowed with a kind of warmth that went deeper than heat. Neighbors filtered in, some curious, some cautious. Martha Jo arrived with a tray of baked oatmeal wrapped in an old dish towel and declared it dessert, breakfast, or both. Doug brought mashed potatoes in a dented crock-pot. Even Edwin's wife, a quiet woman named Eileen, slipped in with a Tupperware of green bean casserole and a polite nod. The food filled the tables, plates stacked high, paper cups marked with names in red ink. Kids ran underfoot, giggling, their cheeks pink from the cold. Missy stood at the center, arms open. "It's not fancy," she said, "just a warm meal. We figured the garage had better stories to tell tonight than the town hall." Walter stood near the coffee station, pouring cups for anyone who asked. His hands were steady movements, slow and sure. He wore the jacket again, not for show, not to prove anything, just because it was his. The patch gleamed every so often when he turned. Later, when the food had softened hearts and the chairs had grown warm beneath their weight, Walter stepped forward. His voice didn't rise above the hum, but it was enough. "I served in Desert Storm," he said, eyes scanning the faces. "There was a time we were surrounded, 3 days, no sleep, less water. One by one we dropped. But Hank's father kept going." A hush fell, light but full. "He pulled me from a burning truck," Walter continued. "Told me not to be afraid of quiet men. Said they're the ones who usually come home carrying others." He looked to Hank, then Missy. "I came here to be left alone. But I owe this town more than silence. You gave me your kindness when I didn't earn it. Tonight I just want to say I'm grateful." Martha Jo wiped her eyes. Doug cleared his throat with more noise than needed. Missy smiled, soft and certain. And then Walter did something no one had seen before. He laughed. Not loud, not long, but real. It changed his face, softened it. The scar near his lip tilted with the motion. His shoulders dropped by half an inch. The door opened. Cold air swept in like a verdict. Edwin stood framed in the light coat, buttoned folder in hand, his expression unreadable but sharp around the edges. "I won't interrupt," he said, though clearly he would. He walked to the center of the garage and held out the paper. "This is a notice from the council. Per zoning regulation 4.117, non-residential buildings cannot be used for private lodging without permit. You are hereby requested to vacate within 72 hours. The room stilled. No one reached for pie. The music stuttered into a commercial. Walter didn't flinch, didn't fold. He looked at the letter, then nodded once. But before anyone else could speak, Missy stepped forward. She placed her plate on the table and turned to face Edwin squarely. "Then let the whole town decide," she said. You want to file papers, fine. But tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and tonight we're breaking bread with a man who wore that patch before we learned to walk. She looked around. Let's see who stands with that. The silence cracked open like morning ice. Martha Jo stood first, then Doug, then Hank pulling off his cap. One by one, folding chairs creaked as the town rose. Edwin stood still, his hand tightening on the folder. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside the garage, under golden light and soft Patsy Cline from the radio, the warmth held steady, silver-stitched steam rising, hearts steadying into something solid. Walter smiled again. Not wide, not proud, just honest. By dawn, the video had over 2,000 views. It showed the inside of Green's garage, strung with soft yellow lights, faces aglow with warmth and coffee steam. Walter Green stood near the back table, a paper plate in hand, and told the story of a desert night when friendship meant survival. He didn't speak long, but every word landed like a stone dropped gently in still water. Missy hadn't meant to record much, just a clip for her uncle out of state. But after Edwin's notice, something in her stirred. She uploaded the video to the town's Facebook page, Fox Ridge Neighbors. By morning, there were 163 comments. Most of them read the same "Thank you for your service." The church bells hadn't yet rung 8 when Martha Jo walked into the community center with a clipboard under one arm and a box of name tags under the other. Hank was already there, looking uncomfortable in a collared shirt. "Let's keep it civil," Missy said, pouring apple tea into paper cups near the front. "That's all I ask." They nodded. By 10 o'clock, there were 80 signatures on the petition to let Walter stay. By 11, a line had formed down the sidewalk. People didn't come just to sign, they came to speak. A teenager with braces said Walter once helped her fix a jammed bike chain without a word. Doug told how he came outside one stormy morning to find the flag on the shop next door had been rehung, straightened, and taped after it tore in the wind. A woman in her 60s, glasses fogged from the cold, stepped to the microphone. "My husband passed 5 years ago," she said. "Every Thanksgiving since Walter has left white carnations on my porch. Never knocked. Never said a word. Just flowers." There was a pause. Then soft applause. Inside, the center tables were set up for discussion. The scent of pine and spiced cider clung to the walls. On the wall-mounted screen, the paused frame from Missy's video showed Walter's silhouette in golden garage light. Each person who entered was handed a small sticker, "I was helped by Walter." By noon, more than half the room wore them. Walter himself was not there. He sat just outside on the steps, sipping hot tea from a styrofoam cup. His jacket rested across his knees, silver star visible now, without shame or hesitation. He didn't want to be a symbol. But something had shifted. Then Edwin arrived. He carried a folder under his arm and walked with a purpose that made the hardwood floor seem louder. "Excuse me," he said, approaching the front. "Before we continue this emotional display, I'd like to offer some clarity." The room tensed. Edwin took out his phone and tapped a button. He held it up on speaker. A polished voice came through the line. "This is Martin Feldman, Executive Development Director. We understand the property in question is essential for roadway access to our planned housing development on Route 12. He cleared his throat. "We're prepared to offer the town of Fox Ridge a conditional development grant of $2 million pending the relocation of the current resident within 72 hours. The room went quiet. Even the heating vent seemed to hush. $2 million, Edwin repeated, his voice even. "Think of what we could do: new roads, updated library, a youth center." Martha Jo stood up. "So we trade a man for pavement?" she asked. Missy stepped forward. "Play the video again." The screen flickered to life. It was a short clip, just 27 seconds. Walter, kneeling in snow, carefully raised the flag outside the café after a winter storm. His breath fogged the air. Wind blew ice across the frame. He steadied the pole, then stepped back, hand to brow. The clip ended. Silence. Then Walter's voice, real present, came from the back. He had stepped inside, jacket on shoulders square. "I don't want to be a problem," he said. "I never did. But if anyone here ever felt I made a difference, say so. And if not, I'll go." He looked at the floor. "I just want the truth. That's all I've ever wanted." No one moved at first. Then a small voice rose, a child's. "He gave me a flag pin when my dad deployed," said a boy near the front. Said brave doesn't always look big. More voices followed. One by one. "I found my dog 'cause he left food out till she came back. He fixed our screen door without saying a word. He brings my mail in when I can't walk." Missy blinked fast, then took a step forward. "Fox Ridge doesn't forget kindness," she said. "And it doesn't sell it either." Someone started humming "God Bless America" near the cider table. Softly, uncertainly. The tune caught like a breeze catching flame. Walter stood still, eyes wide, but this time not in surprise. In something close to hope. Thanksgiving morning brought more than food and flags. It brought a quiet kind of healing. In a town where silence once built walls, kindness gently tore them down. We're reminded that compassion doesn't need a spotlight, and the strongest souls rarely ask to be seen. Like a porch light left on through the night, a simple act of goodness can guide us home when the road turns unfamiliar. So if this story stirred something in you, maybe offer a hand to someone who asks for nothing. After all, the greatest heroes are often those who simply remember to say thank you.